10 years, she had been a leading freelance feature writer in the city, working for all the major newspapers and magazines. These were men she'd laughed with, gossiped with, drunk with. Now, as she studied them intent on their task, they looked like strangers. Familiar features seemed to have shifted, hardened, changed somehow. She wasn't their pal Jackie anymore. She was a brutal bitch, an animal with a perverted sexuality who had killed one of their number. In life, Alison Maxwell had been a talented Scottish Daily Clarion feature writer with a dubious personal reputation. In death, she had been promoted to the blessed martyr of Fleet Street. When she could no longer bear to look at her former colleagues, Jackie turned her eyes to the jury. 9 men, 6 women. A spread of ages from early 20s to middle 50s. They looked, for the most part, like solid, respectable citizens, the sort of people for whom her first crime was being a lesbian, a state from which any other crime might naturally flow. When she'd been led into the dock on the first morning, they had looked at her curiously, weighing her up as if calculating the likelihood of her guilt. But as the prosecution had steadily built its case, they had shown an increasing reluctance to look at her, contenting themselves with furtive glances. She began to wonder if she'd been right to listen to her solicitor's advice about her clothes. The series of smart feminine suits and dresses she'd chosen for the trial made her look too normal, she feared, almost as if she were one of them. Perhaps they'd have been more open-minded about the evidence placed before them if she hadn't disturbed them with that subtle threat. Maybe they'd have been less unnerved by her if she was standing there with her copper hair cropped short, wearing a glad-to-be-gay sweatshirt. Then they could have treated her more like Exhibit A. Wearily, she sighed, and tried to raise her spirits with a glance at the one person she could be certain still believed in her innocence. In the front row of the public benches, her fine white blonde hair falling round her head like a gleaming helmet, Claire Ogilvy sat taking notes. Her neat, small features, dwarfed by the huge glasses she wore, were fixed in concentration, except when she looked up at Jackie. Then she would give a small, encouraging smile, which against all odds and logic kept a flicker of hope alive in Jackie's heart. In the 5 years they'd been together, she'd never had to rely so much on Claire. Whatever happened at the end of the trial, she'd never be able to repay that debt. As soon as the police had arrived that October evening to arrest Jackie, Claire had been on the phone to one of Glasgow's top criminal lawyers who had responded to the call of a fellow solicitor with a speed astonishing to anyone familiar with the procrastinations of his breed. Jim Carstairs had actually been waiting at the Maryhill police station when they'd brought her in to charge her with the murder of Alison Maxwell. Although Claire Ogilvy's flourishing commercial law practice never dealt with criminal law, she always sent any of her clients who needed a good trial lawyer to Macquarie, Stevenson and Carstairs, so Jim had pulled out all the stops for Jackie. But it had made little difference. Because of the gravity of the charge, bail had been refused, and she'd spent the last 8 weeks on remand in the women's prison near Stirling. In spite of the demands of her clients, Claire had somehow contrived to visit her almost every day. It had been the only thing that had kept Jackie going when she felt the walls closing in and heard the voices of madness in her head. There had been times when she'd even begun to wonder herself if she'd killed Alison in a moment of insanity that she could no longer recall. But through it all, Claire had been there, practical, indomitable, supportive. Although Claire concentrated on commercial and contract law herself, she had many friends with criminal practices, and she knew only too well the costs of mounting a first-class defence. So, the morning after the bail hearing, she'd put their fashionable 3-bedroom first-floor flat on the market. Because of its size and its position on a sunny corner near the university, it had been sold within days, thanks to the efficient processes of the Scottish property laws. Claire had dutifully paid half the proceeds into Jackie's bank account to fund her lover's defence. She had promptly bought herself a new home, free from all past associations, in a newly renovated block in the heart of the merchant city, the yuppified district in the city centre, where property developers were busily cashing in on the aspirations of the suddenly rich. Claire told herself she had no doubts about Jackie's innocence.